So today we are really happy to have Nick Martelaro with us. And I have a presentation, a little bit of Nick. So Nick has a very interesting background because he blends product design, interaction design, HRI, and mechatronics engineering. And he's interested in building tools and methods that allow designers to understand people better and to create a more human-centered products. So a little bit of background, Nick graduated with a PhD in mechanical engineering from Stanford University and was co-advised by Larry Leifer and Wendy. He was a researcher at the Digital Experiences Group at the Accenture Technology Labs. And right now, Nick is an assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University. His lab focused on augmenting designers' capabilities through the use of new technology and design methods. And you can check more about Nick's in his personal website and Google Scholar. So today he's going to talk about remote user research for human-robot interaction, and I'm going to give Nick the stage.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, let me get the screen share working. Hopefully everyone is used to this now. All right, share computer sound. We will have a few videos today. Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I really want to thank the Talking Robotics hosts for inviting me. I think this is like a super cool way to bring people together, especially being so socially distant and not being able to maybe meet other people in the HRI community. I really like this as a way to kind of get together, but also sort of share knowledge in a way that's maybe a little less formal than a conference talk. So my talk today is not, I'm gonna kind of be blending some work that I've been doing over the last couple of years and some work that I've been thinking about that's a little newer in terms of where I think remote user research can go and how it can sort of impact human-robot interaction. I would really love to engage in conversation with people afterwards and after this talk. So my contact information is up here. So if you find this stuff interesting, please feel free to reach out to me. I think I'll just give like a really quick little background in addition, just to show you maybe visually what things meant when that Patricia was talking about, like mechanical engineering, mechatronic engineering, you know, where did I come from? So as said, I used to be a mechanical engineer. I used to design things like gearboxes and steam engines and shower fixtures. I then transitioned more into mechatronic engineering. I was always really excited by how computation can be kind of used as ways to design and develop new products. I've done a lot of things from interactive robots to helping build interactive and remote controlled furniture. I've been doing some things more recently in areas of interactive textiles. That was actually work that I was doing while I was at Accenture. So I graduated and then I moved into an industry research position where I was working on interactive devices. Here on the left, this is actually a poster that I worked on. Imagine a digital poster for a large animation company that would basically come to life when you came up and took a selfie with it. So I'm able to recognize that you're taking a selfie, and basically the character would come to life when that happened. I also helped start up a little bit of a smart materials initiative there. I'll say that I am not an expert in that area, but I was probably one of the few people who was willing to just pull out a sewing machine in the middle of a consulting business. And so that's how I ended up working on that. It was really fun. And actually I collaborated a little bit with Lining Yao, who actually is one of my collaborators here, and we share a lab here at the CMU HCII. But today, I think what I really want to talk about is this sort of thesis that remote user research is the future. My background is in product design. I do a lot of work that spans kind of the areas of product design, much of that being in the sort of first fuzzy front end, where we're really trying to understand people, generate insights into what people's needs are, and then develop product ideas around that. And I think that this is something that's very well taken up in the HRI community. And there's many people out there who are doing basically user research to figure out, well, what should we use robots for, and how can our robots basically fit into people's everyday lives? Now, of course, this has been really what a lot of people do is, more in-person type work, right? We get out, we go talk to people, we interview people, we go to people's homes, we go to their workplaces, and a lot of this has basically stopped. So because of COVID-19. So social distancing measures, which are definitely good and should be followed, have, however, had an impact on the user research community. And for many of you, and I know many of our students here at the HCII in robotics, right, this has actually been something that people have to work around, right? They have to think about new ways of kind of doing their work remotely. And this is something from a research perspective and a methodological perspective I'm really interested in. So in terms of the things that have happened and sort of the impacts we're seeing, yeah, in-person qualitative user research is basically slowed down or stopped. But people are able to switch over to things like Zoom. So we're able to do video conferencing, we can do screen sharing. And this actually works okay, especially if you work on, say, mobile or software-based products, web design, GUIs. And a lot of people in the HCI world have been doing these actually for a while now, and this is actually well used in industry. But for those of us who work on robotics, who have physical robots we need to interact with, and are in really contextually situated spaces where we really all want to understand what's going on around someone, basically these tools that we kind of have of just, say, throwing up a Zoom screen or even doing something on your phone and having someone kind of look around, which you can do, it's really limiting. But I think that we're kind of given this opportunity right now to sort of step back and really think about, well, do we actually need to be in person? I mean, being in person is great to really understand what's going on, but do we have to? And can we actually develop methods that help us to have very similar experiences, really understand what's going on, richly see context, richly see people and their reactions and their interactions? Can we do that without having to be there? So I think that I kind of look at this as an opportunity. And when I spoke to a number of professional user researchers about this, that was actually one of the sentiments, was that people are like, this might be a really interesting way for us to move forward and progress as a field. Now, I think one of the things that's really exciting is that today we have a ton of capabilities to basically allow us to have multimodal interaction remotely. And for those who are in the robotics area, I think you actually have a lot of the skills and a lot of the equipment that you already need to kind of do this stuff, right? Most people are working with video systems, speech interaction. They're capturing all kinds of data from all these sensors. So I don't think it's actually a really hard step to say, well, let's basically link that back up, send that information back. And if I can at least get a robot or some type of system into a physical space, right, you're basically most of the way there. Then it's really about thinking about how do you set up and how do you kind of run these sessions when you're sort of behind the screen. Actually, one of the things I like in this too, for those who have ever been to a professional usability lab, there's sort of this one-way mirror that people would be in the other room trying out something, and then you and your research team would be in the back room. And in a way, I think today we can basically create these digital back rooms, these digital behind the one-way glass. And so that's really where a lot of my work has been, and where I'm really excited to see things going forward in the future. So let me show you some examples, because I realize that it's a little bit like, oh, we're talking about being remote, but what does this actually look like, and how contextually situated can we really get here? So I've done some work, and some work I want to highlight here, looking at speech-based interaction with music systems. This is actually work that I did along with some team members from Spotify, Sarah Menikin, Jen Tom, and Henriette Kramer, and then I did this along with my advisor, Wendy Ju, where we were really exploring and having them as the user research team really explore, if you were going to have this sort of speech-based interaction with your music, say in really contextually situated spaces like the car or the home, what does that look like? How can we prototype that? And how do people actually engage and interact with these sort of prototype systems that we're sending out? So I want to show a video of what this looks like for the user.
Mississippi Pop, the passenger.
Oh, really? I love this song. I actually played it in a band. I love it.
So in this case, the driver's driving along, and there are basically the team actually from Spotify is in the background, and they are basically running this sort of Wizard of Oz prototype of this speech-based system. And so in this case, they ask, oh, what are you interested in? They basically show a song, and the driver actually reacts, they respond, and they go, oh my gosh, I love this song. Now, one of the things to note is that all the video you see here, we're transmitting that live back. So the remote team can actually see all these video channels. They can see the driver's response. They can see that the driver turns up the audio. So they're able to really work with that information to actually further engage. So I'll show another clip where what they do is actually in the moment, they kind of think about what they might be able to ask or say to kind of continue that engagement.
I play the drums. Oh, what else did you play? That's what you asked. Do you know from Golden Earring, Radar Lab? That's a neat one, also fits nice to that. A Fool for Your Stockings from ZZ Top.
This conversation actually goes on for much longer. It turns out asking people like, what else did you used to listen to? There's actually a lot of really simple questions that you can ask that will get people to talk a lot about their music preferences. And this is actually something that I have found to be really powerful about these types of interactions is that, you know, a lot of what we do as user researchers when we're trying to understand and really pull information from people, you don't actually have to ask very complicated questions. You have to actually just find the really simple questions that elicit a lot of information. So actually through this study, we found kind of a small set of questions that really seem to kind of elicit a lot of information. So you can see here that this is a really interesting, kind of quite engaging interaction. Now I want to say here, and I want to point out that this driver is aware that this is being remotely controlled. They're aware that this is a Wizard of Oz setup, but at the same time, with sort of a well-crafted scenario, right, people can kind of suspend their belief about, okay, yeah, I know that there's maybe humans on the other end, but I can engage in this situation to really say, well, what could this experience be like? So I think this is one of the important things to note here. So we're not trying to deceive people. We're using this as sort of a probe to understand what potentially autonomous interaction could look like. Now, in terms of what this looks like behind the scenes. So these are the kind of interactions and the experiences I want to show that you can have, right? This is a driver on the road, you have full live video, you're interacting in real time. But what does it take on the back end? So basically you kind of need to set up sort of this mission control. And I'll say I like that only because I think it's fun space thing and it feels fun to think about being like in mission control, but that's really what you're doing here, right? And so what we have is here on the left, you can see this is a wizard who has basically a data station. They've got live data coming back. They've got remote controls. So that's sort of their teleoperation interfaces. But what they also have is those multiple streams of video that are coming in. And I'll say that one of the things is that if I did this work a few years ago, you know, at the time, right, streaming HD video over 4G networks was like just becoming like pretty usable. Today, things are getting even better. And so that's one of the other exciting things that even if you're really out there in the field, as long as you can have, say, a good cellular connection, you know, you can really stream back a lot of information. And so doing multi-channel real-time video, real-time data, and then real-time teleop control is totally reasonable. But you do need to think a little bit about what you're actually building on your sort of control side. So I want to maybe take a moment now just to talk a little bit about where these sort of methods kind of come from and where I get a lot of sort of my inspiration. So I realize this is kind of a large chart. I'm actually happy to share these slides afterwards. But there's really a rich history of remote user research methods that that we can kind of build on and look to for inspiration about how to do our own kinds of remote work. And there's a lot of things that I think the HRI community can kind of build on and learn from here. So some of the earliest examples include things like experience sampling. So these were methods where it used to be that you had a pager. Nowadays, you can actually do this with a phone, where basically you get a text message every once in a while that asks you to sort of rate a question, maybe take a photo or a quick video of your context. And these methods are hugely powerful within HCI. They get used all over. And then building on from that, if you want to do things in more real time, remote contextual inquiry, and that's a lot of the kind of work that I do, that's been done, of course, through screen sharing. And in a lot of cases, it's been done for more, mobile or graphical user interface type work. But I think that you can imagine doing this stuff with robotics. And that's really where I'm sort of trying to push these things, is that can you do this with systems that are out in the world? If your robot already has cameras, sensors, can you basically, act or basically kind of remote into that robot and use that as a remote contextual inquiry tool? So robotics as a design research tool, not just as the tool for study. Of course, Wizard of Oz methods are hugely used within HRI, and slap a network on it, now it's remote. That is a lot of what the work I do is, but there's actually a nice rich history of other work that looks at that. Now, the last two things here, I think, are actually some of the areas that I've been getting really excited about, which are chatbot assisted user research. So for those, if any of you here are really interested in speech-based interactions, I think this gets exciting, which is chatbots that are actually autonomous, that are asking questions and collecting responses. And I'll point you to some of these papers here in 2019, Kim et al. 2019 and Zhao et al. 2019. Again, I'll share these references later and in the Slack, but there's been some really amazing results that people will give the same kind of rich qualitative responses to a chatbot as they would a human. Of course, you have to design that conversation well, but it's really impressive. And this allows you to scale up the kind of work you can do, I think, really in a really interesting ways. I'm super excited for this area. And the last area is this area of things as co-ethnographers. There's been this really cool contingent of work by Giacardi et al., Gorkovenko et al., and Marie Rust, as well as my own thinking here, around basically utilizing digital interactive objects as ethnographic partners. So again, I kind of mentioned this idea, right? So we study robots, we study user interaction with robots, but could the robots actually be sort of our co-ethnographer partners? Can they actually take on some of these research roles through the way that they can collect data, through the way that they can interact with people? And so I think that this is a really exciting area, and I'm really, I think there's a lot of really neat ideas that are coming out of this, but also a lot of really interesting questions around how we think about, say, privacy, especially as we automate more of these things versus, say, especially the kind of work I do now, where we're really engaged, kind of directly, people really know what's going on. So just a little bit of background here for those who are really interested in this. I want to show now just a couple of clips of some newer work that I've been doing that really is much more in kind of, I would argue, sort of the robotics space, where we're really looking at physical systems. I'll argue that there is a lot to be said about seeing how sort of a lot of the physical interactions, how important it is to really see those physical interactions, and why I really think that remote user research for HRI is going to be really important as people also start putting their systems into the field and deploy them. So I've been doing some work along with some collaborators at Cornell Tech, my advisor, Wendy, who's now there, but also Ilan Mandel, and some other collaborators at UC Santa Cruz, who people here may know, Kevin Weatherwax and Leila Takayama, on observing farm operators with semi-automated tractor equipment. And so these are real systems. They're made by John Deere. The tractors are autonomous. They drive themselves via GPS traces. They have robotic equipment on the back. And we are trying to understand, like, what does it look like to really work with these? So let me show you a video of this. So in this clip here, the driver, let me go back so you can see that photo. It's actually quite interesting. You can see the driver in sort of this relaxed pose. I think, a lot of people think about farm work as something which is, labor intensive, but it's really interesting to see, and from just a future of work perspective, like, what does the work role look like as more autonomy comes in? One of the things too that I'll point out is that this operator is a little bit younger. He's got his cell phone in the car. He's chatting with people. I mean, honestly, in some ways, his work here doesn't actually, Elon was one who pointed this out. I think they noticed that he was Snapchatting, and that basically, like, his work is now starting to look not that different from maybe all of us sitting at our desk being like, oh yeah, I'll check a little bit of messages, and then, maybe I'll, okay, I got to do something. Now, one of the things I'll point out though is that this driver is actually still doing supervisory control. So for those who are in a supervisory control and autonomy and HRI, this driver is still kind of doing that. Let me show you another example here of what happens when things don't go well and when you kind of have to really, in a way, like fight the robotics. So again, I want to point out here, this cultivator head is called the RoboCrop. What these things do is they pick out the weeds in the field. And they actually have two cameras. So it's a dual computer vision system that's tracking the rows. Now, what you're going to see in this clip is what happens when that system fails. So one of the things I'll note there is what he just did, I believe, is put it in a manual override. So the system was tracking, it basically lost the tracking in the field. And you could see him kind of fighting with it and things like that. So I'll note that what we're doing here is, again, in that really similar way that I showed you before, kind of being behind that digital one-way mirror. We're actually, it's Skype actually. This is the Skype recording. You might be able to see the little Skype things here. So we're watching this in real time. We have these camera views. We've also got some basic data coming from the tractor, just location, so GPS trace, things like that. And we, of course, can see this. And so we're in the back room, and actually we're fully distributed at this point. I'm in San Francisco. I've got team members in New York. We're able to basically ride along and observe this interaction without actually needing to be there. Now, what we're able to do is then follow up. And so this is something that I've done in a lot of my work, and I generally think is a good idea if it fits within your study, is to kind of ask, well, what's going on? Because you want to be able to observe behavior, but it's also really important to be able to kind of see, well, if you want to know what people are thinking, you can ask them what they're thinking. So I'll show you an example. We basically asked what happened. You can see this operator's response.
What was going on through the middle of the field?
Well, it started to get all wonky because the way that the cultivator is pushing the weeds over, it's making it look like the tops of the beets, so then it kind of gets crazy. It's kind of happening down there at the end too. And when I was going down the first turn, it was having trouble reading where the beets were, so it messes up every once in a while, but I didn't expect it to be this bad on this new cultivator, to be honest, but sometimes it happens. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about it. It just shows that we should have cultivated this the first time.
So he talks a little bit about, sort of what he believes is going wrong, why the system is not working. He thinks it really should have worked. Actually, it's interesting. He makes a little bit of a comment on having, maybe we should have done this earlier. Which is an interesting thing to think about from the perspective of, say, operations, right? And so there's larger systems going on, and we can kind of learn about that, right? So one, we can see the challenges he's having, say with the controls, with the robotics, but we're also kind of able to uncover a little bit more of like, oh, maybe they should have cultivated this earlier such that the autonomous systems may have worked better. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and I'm actually I'm almost done. But there's been some other work that I'm looking into, just thinking about, well, how can everyone here start doing this? So a lot of the systems I'm building, one of the challenges, this is kind of like complex stuff. You got to build a bunch of networking and things. I've been thinking about how to get this stuff even smaller. Like what's like the simplest minimal robot that we could put into someone's home or to their environment and actually start to explore this idea of remote user research and remote interaction prototyping. I want to give a shout out to some really amazing work that my friends at Cornell, Hamish Tennant and in Malte Jung's lab actually did, where they utilized the fact that, for those who know Dynamixel motors, they have a feedback sensor. The cool thing about it is that you can basically feedback the signals and puppet other motors. You can actually have them do exactly the same thing. That's what's happening here in this. And I have a student who's we're building a very simple, couple degree of freedom robot to put in people's homes and kind of explore what interactions look like. But the nice thing about this is actually communicating real time over the network. So these are not tied together electrically. It's all signals. And I'm really interested to see what is it like for, say, a user researcher to sit at home and puppet a robot to actually kind of interact with people remotely. Now, one of the big reasons for doing this is once we can put a camera on that face, we actually can just look around, and it gets us one step beyond just Zoom. So for example, right now, what people do if they want to talk to people in their homes is they get on Zoom, but you have a fixed camera. And so actually by even building this really simple robot, we can at least get just a little bit more interaction with sort of, the home environment, especially if you're doing things where you're looking to think about, say, home robotics. Like you want to be able to look around, or if someone says, hey, why don't you take a look at this? So this is just some new work I've been looking into. And for anyone else out there who it's just really cool. I never get tired of actually looking at this video of these puppet robots. I know it's really simple, but there's really great instructions on how to do this with Trustum Robotics. So, all right. So in conclusion, I just have a couple of thoughts, and this is some thinking where I'm trying to think ahead from a methodological standpoint of where can we go in terms of our abilities and our methods for doing remote user research, especially with physical systems like robotics. And what does it actually, what can it actually support or open up in terms of new opportunities for us? So I'm really interested from a research perspective right now, like what is it about in-person research that's very important? What do researchers really get value from? And I think a lot of those things have to do with context and really, being able to connect with someone, but then how can we recreate that remotely? And in addition to that, I'm really curious to know how effective these methods are. I think one of the things that's important to understand is that remote research in some ways opens up completely new areas of work. So some of the very naturalistic work that I showed you before, like riding in a tractor, we actually can't sit in the tractor. It is too small. So these have really opened up new research opportunities for us, but I am curious to know sort of how effective they are versus in-person things. The other thing too is that I'm interested in knowing sort of where we go in terms of privacy, especially because when we're doing things remotely, right, it's a different sense, it's a different kind of interaction when someone doesn't see you. They don't actually invite you into their home, but they've invited, say, your data systems into the home. So I'd like to look more into that. And in the last two things, and these are kind of really other ideas that I think are opened up by the fact that we're doing more remote work, which is how can we actually make remote user research more inclusive and accessible? One of the really cool benefits that I see is that as long as you can get online, in theory, you could go remotely to many contexts and do research, even if, say, you maybe are not fully able-bodied and could get there. I mean, even something as simple as being a wheelchair user who can't get over someone's home steps, like the 2 steps to someone's home, there's no reason that a wheelchair user can't be a great user researcher, but maybe it's just much more challenging to do it in person. Now they have the ability to just do it at home. And I think that that could be really exciting to look at. And lastly, from a sustainability perspective, I mean, for those in the professional world, people will do a lot of travel to do their user research. And I'm curious to know, like, you know, what are the impacts of that? And can these methods basically allow us to do, say, more sustainable type work? Because we don't have to travel as often and we don't really need as many resources. So I'll end it there. I want to say thank you to everyone for listening. And I am really excited to hear people's questions and have conversations, debate me on ideas, ask me things. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nick. So just to recap a little bit, we enter the Q&A now, and you are free to ask questions by just raising the hand and talking or dropping them on the chat. So feel free to take this moment to engage with Nick.
And I'll stop the screen share that we can, so we can all kind of see people on this, but I can bring up slides if people ask questions and there are things that I have that I can show. So let me just make sure I'm ready to go with that.
Can I jump in with a question, or am I supposed to raise my hand?
No, go for it.
Okay, and I apologize, my dogs are barking, so hopefully that's not loud.
No.
So I'm Amanda Buddymeyer from the University of Pittsburgh. That was a great presentation, thank you. And so I do research with pedagogical robots that teach kids. And so we've definitely been struggling with figuring out the best way to move forward with our research. And one of the things, like there's just logistical issues of how do we deliver, even if we can get robots to these kids, how do we deliver it? What kind of tasks that we do in terms of getting it turned on and on board and connected? What happens if something breaks? You know, How do we deal with that? So are these, and then how do you get the robot back? Are these issues that you've had to deal with, and how have you dealt with that?
Okay, this is a really good question. And actually I'm super interested in hearing about and actually knowing how people do, say, onboarding for remote studies where you're using physical objects. I think the questions you bring up are really important. I don't think we have a lot of examples of that. And I actually think that there could be some really neat stuff to like say about that. In terms of the things that we've done, so in a lot of my earlier work, what we were doing was, so some of the stuff was like great. I mean, these were like ridiculous automotive setups with cameras everywhere and huge things in the back. And we had to set those up in person. We would maybe send one person out. Now, in terms of thinking about things for the home, one of the things now is we have been able to sort of shrink the size of our systems. And actually, the farm stuff was working off of cell phones. So those were actually just, some of those things actually started to become just cell phones. That's a lot easier for people to work with because they're used to that. So I can imagine, maybe children are not gonna, well, I don't know, some kids are really good with cell phones and you might be able to, like, they might be just fine, but their parents also might be able to do that. I think a lot of work probably has to go into like the design of the onboarding materials. I'm actually curious, so because you brought it up, I would love to hear more about how you're handling that. Because I think that, or if you haven't yet, I'd love to talk offline about that because I think that there's really interesting stuff to do there. So, but yeah, in terms of this now, actually with the little home robot, I'm planning to explore that next semester, where we're going to build a couple of those and send them out to people and see like what it takes, like get it on Wi-Fi, you know, do this whole thing. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to basically good onboarding and unboxing experience. So.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask anyone that wants to just turn their camera on. That's perfectly acceptable as well. And I'm going to pass to Sarah now for the next question.
I also going to thank for your amazing presentation and your interesting work. First of all, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the setup, but you already said that you are doing the setups in person. So like I wanted to change my question a little bit more about, because you said that in the next term that you wanted to do the experiments at homes, that will you also planning to do the setups yourself? Because I tried one experiment remotely at home, and since it's the person's their home, and they set up the experiment style, it was like the setup change for everyone, and that's at the end that creates some problems for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask your thoughts and your visions for that. How are you going to conduct your story? Thank you.
Sure. Well, that's great. That's a really good follow-on. I mean, so the way that I've been thinking about it is, I'll say for a lot of my things, I put as much remote control and remote system admin into the kind of compute side of stuff. Actually, when I went in and when we did DJ Bot in the home, so the systems I was using for that, it was just a Mac Mini, but I had basically full remote access to it, which raises some privacy things because it means I also can remote in and control everything on that computer. We had a number of things that we had procedures in place. We had physical, like you can cover the cameras and, you know, turn things off. You can turn everything off so that people can feel more comfortable with this thing in their home, because they actually had it there for a couple of weeks, or they had it, we interacted over the course of a week, but they actually had it in the home for a little bit. The things that I'm thinking about, and I'm actually going to have some students work on, is probably the biggest things are internet connectivity. So thinking about that, one of the things I've been thinking about is basically is twofold. One is either setting up the Wi-Fi networking beforehand, or simply just deploying it with our own 4G network. So there is no, like, if you turn it on and it's already online. There are some really great 4G LTE. I don't know what systems you're using. If you're using a phone, it's great. Stick a SIM card in a phone if that's your compute. If your compute's more like a Raspberry Pi or like a mini computer, there are really great LTE sticks. And depending on where you are in the world, 4G plans are relatively affordable, even for like pretty high data plans. I've been doing that more often now. And so I think as long as you're willing to pay for the data, then stick your own network on there. And then, yeah, if you can install I mean, I install things like AnyDesk or what's the other one? I used to use another one, TeamViewer. So it depends on how desktop system you are, but I basically, have like full remote admin access to my stuff. Now, physical setup, that's something where having a phone call with someone can be really helpful. So often what we'll do is we'll actually walk people through on the phone. And that's something where you could like say, hey, could you just do a little video call? So you could do the video call there and say, great, we're set up. I think it would be really interesting though, now that you're making me think about it, assuming you can get it on the network, you could have like a whole like design startup thing where it calls in and you really walk someone through with the robot. That's a way to do it. Okay, that's a really neat idea. I'm gonna write that down. So cool. I don't know if that answers all of your questions. I mean, it's a lot of sysadmin stuff, to be frank with you. So whatever, as much as you know about that, TeamViewer, AnyDesk, these are really nice graphical things. If you're not like a Linux or, if you're not really into SSHing into stuff, I mean, then that's a nice way to do it. So, and that's really what I do with a lot of my systems. So.
Thank you, Nick. I'm just going to read out loud the next question that was
Sure.
dropped in chat by Anthony Wallace. So he asks, how do you think that these research methods can impact the hospitality industry since it's tremendously impacted so much by COVID?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that, I'd be really curious because there's elements of the hospitality industry of like where robotics are being used and deployed. And so in theory, right, you can kind of, assuming you have access to those systems, can you actually call in with those, or can you get data from those? I think one thing that would be interesting here is, do you want to do this stuff live, or do you want to do it? And this is that area of like robots as maybe co-ethnographers, where the robots are actually deployed, they're actually going out, and maybe you're adding in just a little bit of their interaction that tries to get a little bit about the user experience. And, it could be as simple as like asking someone a question. It feels kind of weird, like it's the equivalent of, you go to a website and then it says like, at the end of your web visit, would you like to, fill out a survey for us? Like I could imagine, like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but I could imagine like a goofy thing where, you know, you have a hospitality robot, it comes, delivers something to say your room, and it says, hey, would you be interested in doing a quick survey like with me, or like have a quick conversation with me? I have no idea how that would work. It works on the web. I don't know why it couldn't work in real life. Maybe someone's willing to talk with this thing. I think another thing though, in terms of hospitality is, I think there are some questions here about sort of the privacy and like, how do you engage with, say, the clientele, right? Because and I think it depends. I think this is something that requires a lot of thinking and strategizing about when you're doing any, and this is for any kind of user research, but it's, I think, a lot more when you're saying conscripting robots to do this work for you. So if you're doing research, say, on the staff, like the workers, then you can kind of maybe get more buy-in from them. But I'd be really curious to think about how you do this from the perspective of, say, the people who are staying at a hotel or in hospitality. I realize I'm thinking here about robots when I think hospitality, I'm thinking about hotels and stuff. There's also the entire, if you consider kind of the restaurant industry, food services as hospitality, yeah, that could be another area to do it, especially because you really, really ought to be separated in terms of restaurants. So I'd be curious to hear what other people have to think about that too, in terms of, yeah, hospitality robots. I think a lot of things there is that you've got real stuff that's deployed, and the question is, how do you get into their systems, or how do you, I mean, or can you also be a part of their work? So.
Thanks, Nick. I'm gonna ask Abby to ask the next question.
Thank you, Patricia, for noticing that I unmuted myself. Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for your talk today. It's so nice to see you. I have a question about doing remote user study, which is trying to investigate physical interaction with the robot.
Okay.
So people cannot come to labs for in-person user studies these days, but still want to make progress on investigating the physical, tactile nature of some of the research problems that I'm facing currently. I have a few thoughts, but I was interested in knowing more about what you are thinking in terms of still making progress through some of the tools that you are interested in building.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things there is, I think that there's a couple things that are questions I have for you, I guess, which is like, what is it about the physical interaction? What information do you think is important to see? And is that information, say, very visual information about how people are, say, physically engaging and interacting? Is it more, and is it information that could potentially be gained and understood even remotely, even if you're watching live or something, through any kind of sensing or feedback from the systems? So one of the things I don't really show it, I didn't show it as much in this talk, but it's something where we're starting to do a little more work in, is how does data, like sensing data, like how does that actually help a remote wizard? I think many of the things that I work on are super qualitative. So video is almost always like, yeah, you gotta have the video. And then there, I think, figuring out where the important parts of the video are. So in the stuff I do, we always have multiple channels, right? We usually a minimum 2 videos to get 2 angles, but oftentimes it's 3 or 4. And I'm imagining, maybe this is something where you could just augment, say, the robot that you're working with to say, well, there's a camera maybe I'm imagining a robot. I have no idea what kind of robots you're actually working with, but like, do I stick on a couple of other camera views to sort of see maybe what physical interaction someone's having? Or do I feed back, say, that sensor data in real time? But a question I have there is how useful, and I don't know the answer, is like, how useful is it for that remote viewer to like see, say, live data traces on like a dashboard? I actually think I'm really interested. I would be excited to kind of look at like how effective those things are for like real-time monitoring, real-time interaction, and things like that. I don't know how much you can talk about like like, what is it specific? I don't know, maybe if there's thoughts there, but if there's anything you can talk about, like maybe we could, yeah, go a little more into like what could work and what might be worthwhile to try.
Yeah, I can follow up with that later on offline.
Sure. Cool. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from Glenda. Glenda, if you want to unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, hey Nick, thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting. I'm not very familiar already with the work you've been doing, and maybe my question reflects that. But I'm interested in this idea of remote ethnography.
Sure.
What you mentioned and some of the methodological issues about that. Because I really sympathize with the idea of collecting data remote and to think in new ways. But I'm also wondering, and maybe you already addressed this in your publications, but I'm really wondering how you deal with the reflective aspects of being an ethnographer, especially because even if you're from a psychological or sociological tradition, this idea that humans can have a sense of the atmosphere, they can respond immediately to how people react also to their presence, but also how, you know, how far can you go in your data collection?
Yeah.
And I think that this, of course, these elements of ethnographic work is lost, which I think is the benefit of the method. And we all have experienced now with Zoom and Skype and all these platforms that this having a good calibration with other people's feelings and emotions and atmospheres is really hard to transmit in this online format. And I just wonder if you, what thoughts you have in your work about the quality of this data and how the researcher relate to the people they observe and these kind of traditional discussions about ethnographic methods.
Yeah, this is like a fantastic question. I have similar questions, which is how effective are these methods? How good is this information? How much? I think a lot of it, so in the stuff that I've been doing, I think some of the really interesting things where we've had people, you know, do these is, one, we're working with people who are trained in sort of these in-person user research and sort of ethnographic methods. And I should say, from a design context, these are lightweight ethnographic methods. There's a difference here between sort of what designers do as ethnographic-like methods and like true ethnography. I actually don't claim to do true ethnography in the deep sense of it, and especially the rich tradition of ethnography. But in terms of what is it that's important, and that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. And I think that there are a lot of things lost by being remote. I think you're right, by basically being in this sort of, you know, we're mostly used to Zoom. But actually one question I have here is like, Zoom is one fixed point camera. This is actually one of the things I have a question around, is like, what does multi-point camera give you? What does movable cameras, where you actually can control the cameras in the space? But still, you're only going to have a limited view. The other thing I'll say here is, in terms of some of the work that we've done a lot of things where people are collaborating remotely, collaborating with each other behind the scenes. And actually, they're having conversations with each other. And that's been sort of interesting to look at, because in a way, right, if you're not in the environment, you're not really experiencing something, you have to kind of imagine or like envision or like feel that experience, like you're kind of simulating it in your head, if you can get enough information. And one of the things that could be useful here is when you're working with multiple people, is that because you can have a conversation, like everyone has different experiences, they might be able to relate to different aspects of what's going on and then have a conversation around that. So that's maybe one other area that I could imagine where like, okay, this is a way to kind of supplant the limitations of this. But I think that there actually needs to be more work done in this space of like, what do you lose and what do you gain? So yeah, I think it's a great question. I unfortunately, I don't have like an answer of like, oh yes, it's, you know, this is what makes it all fine. I also think that this is something too, it's going to be, you know, people are going to have access. Right now, it maybe feels like we're constricted, like we kind of only have remote methods. But eventually things are going to open up and you're going to get to go back. Hopefully people are going to get to go back to doing in-person stuff. So then it's really a matter of thinking about, well, when do we use certain methods, right? What questions do we have? What questions can we, and then how do we answer that question with the appropriate method? Can some methods be answered with remote methods? Do they actually work better with remote methods? And what really needs to just be experienced? The other thing too is you can think about things, and this is something that when I was talking with people in practice was thinking about things on a continuum of like moving, you know, through methodologies. So one could imagine starting with some rapid ethnography on the ground, but then moving to actually continue long-term interactions remotely, because that's actually easier, more cost-effective, more sustainable. But you've had enough of that sort of experience where you really felt the context and maybe really felt the people, that then moving online doesn't actually feel as limiting. So that, although again, that's all speculative, like I wonder that, but that's kind of where I can imagine people taking things in the future with that. So, but thank you for the question.
Can I just say something in reply quick?
Sure.
Yeah, sure, but it needs to be a bit fast because we need to wrap up.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I agree that, of course, maybe a mixture of remote and more traditional ethnography might be interesting, but especially the question of the researcher's role in collecting data, not just the data itself. I think this is where more traditional methodological discussion could be quite beneficial, or it might even bring a new perspective. But we can discuss that in a channel or something.
Definitely.
Yes, we actually want to invite everyone to Slack. We're going to post a link here, and we usually take the rest of the discussion there to be mindful of people's times. But I want to take the time right now to thank Nick for the amazing session. Q&A and presentation was really, really great. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to very quickly wrap up. So for next session, which is going to be right next Friday, so we are not going to have a one between week, we have David Porfirio from the University of Wisconsin-Madison talking about authoring social interactions between humans and robots. So stay tuned for that. And our session today was supported by RoboHub and RoboHub Podcasts, who did an amazing job in disseminating it as well. So I want to thank everyone for being with us today. And we hope to see you next week.
Cool. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
See you next week.